too, ladies. So nobody else can hear that except us in the Zoom meeting. And I always make a comment about that. And everybody goes, we don't know what you're talking about. It's like, well, they're just letting us know that we're going to record in case anybody wants to like jump ship. So now's your chance, Georgie and Kerri, if it's like, get out while you can. So I'm going to fill a little bit of time to give Facebook a little bit of notice that we're here. So hi, Georgie. Hi, Kerri. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Good. Happy Pub Day, Georgie.
Yay. I'm so excited for this and so excited to be here.
I know. We wish that it was live in person, but this is the second best thing. And we're so happy that both of you are here with us for this. So thank you for that. So just real quick about what's going to happen tonight for those of you that are joining us on Facebook. If you're watching this later on YouTube, none of this is going to pertain to you, but you'll see a great conversation and you can still buy the book from Warwick's. So in the comment section, I'm going to be putting in Georgie's book, The Last Debutantes. Easy to click on that. There it is. There's that beautiful cover. Easy to click on that link. If you are located here, Warwick's is in La Jolla, San Diego, California. If you're located nearby, there's an option for you to still purchase the book online, but click pick up in store. So we'd love to have you come out to the store. There's nothing better than shopping and finding other great books like Kerri's to buy and all kinds of other things. Warwick's has a wonderful as our book department is, we have a whole other section of the store that is gifts and jewelry and fine pens and lots of fun stuff to shop for there. So we would love to see you in town. But you can also, I always like to say, if there's any way that to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's. We ship all over the country. Kerri, I think you're joining us from Boston. Is that correct?
I am. Here Boston. I am. Boston's the miracle of Zoom.
Exactly. So hopefully we have some people maybe from Boston watching. Georgie's here in California with us and all across the country. So we can ship that book anywhere to you. Also, Kerri and Georgie are going to talk for about 35 minutes today, but we love audience questions. So if you have a question for Georgie or Kerri, go ahead and put that in the comment section too. I'll bring those into the conversation after they're done chatting about this wonderful new book. So let me introduce those lovely ladies and I'll turn it over to them. So Georgie Blalock is a history lover and movie buff who enjoys combining her different passions through historical fiction and a healthy dose of period piece films. I like that healthy dose. I have a feeling it might be more than a little healthy.
A bit more.
When not writing, she can be found prowling the nonfiction history section of the library or the British film listings on Netflix. As I mentioned, we're here today to talk about her debut, her launch day today of The Last Debutantes. With her today is Kerri Maher. Kerri is the author of The Kennedy Debutante, which we hosted back, I think was it in the summer, maybe fall, somewhere around there. We hosted the three of you ladies.
So long ago.
Who knows? It was something. You can go back and look at that if you'd like, to see that conversation about the Kennedy Debutante, which People magazine described as a riveting reimagining of a true tale of forbidden love. And she also wrote, "This is not a writing manual, notes for the young writer in the real world" under the name Kerri Majors, excuse me. She holds an MFA from Columbia University and founded Yarn, an award-winning literary journal of short-form YA writing. A writing professor for many years, she now writes full-time and lives with her daughter and dog in a leafy suburb west of Boston, Massachusetts. Ladies, have a great conversation. We'll see you in about a half hour.
All right. Thanks so much, Julie. That dog might join us at some point.
My dog might too. So
okay. All right.
We'll see how it goes.
All right. Exactly. Well, first of all, Georgie, congratulations on this book. I mean, can we zoom in a little bit on your cover because it is so gorgeous. I mean, like, look at the ripples on that satin gown. I mean, it's just like, it's such a fabulous cover. So
yes, I love this cover.
It's just like, I know we actually talked yesterday and you said when you saw it, you just went, it's perfect.
I love this cover so much that, and I told you this yesterday too, is that in the book, actually, the main character's hair is black, but it just looks so beautiful with the blonde. I'm like, leave it, because it's gorgeous.
Yes, it just is. It is just absolutely a stunning cover. And, I had a chance to read the book before it came out, and it is as beautiful inside as out. And it really just captures this amazing moment in time in 1938, the last real debutante, the last real season, with a capital S of the debutantes coming out. war was the cloud of war was looming, and you just captured that tension between the sort of the glamour and the impending war, which they knew it was coming, but the readers know it's really know it's coming. And you just captured that so beautifully. So I'm excited for readers to finally get to buy it today. It's your launch day. Yes. So, okay. So your book stars Valerie Cole. And so I'm wondering how did you select her as the debutante whose story to focus on? There were many debutantes in 1938.
39, actually.
30, I'm sorry, 39.
No worries.
39. I know. It's because of, Kit Kennedy.
I know. Yeah, that's.
But anyway, so I apologize.
No worries.
How did you decide to write about Valerie?
When I started researching the book, I was doing the big overview and reading all these research books about the debutantes in that season. And there's a great YouTube video. If you just type in debutantes 1939, it comes up. And actually some of the people that are in the book, you actually see interviews with them talking about this season. And so I was looking for someone who would really, would have the most interesting story. And I kept seeing these mentions of Valerie Cole, and that she was Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's niece, and that she lived in number 10 Downing Street during that season, and that Mrs. Anne Chamberlain, her aunt, brought her out from there. And I thought, wow, like how unique is that not only is there somebody that's participating in this last season before the war, before everything changes, but she's also there in the middle of all the politics that are going on at the same time. So she has this front row view to both worlds. And then when I started researching her story, she just had a lot to work with. Her father was Horace de Vere Cole, and he was known as a prankster, but he was also a wastrel, and he wasted his entire fortune, and he died in a hovel in France. And he took Valerie down with him. And when her world fell apart, it was Anne Chamberlain who stepped in and brought her to England and gave her a home and acted as a mother and really helped her not only just transition from this impoverished upbringing into society, but just into the world that the novel takes place in, but also, just helping her to understand her past and who she is, and, why she's going to make of herself. And I just thought there was just so much there to explore that I just couldn't help but pick her. And one of the things I did too is, if you go and you do any research about her name is Valerie Cole. If you see in the newspaper articles at the time, that's how they refer to her. But I really liked adding in her dad's, the De Vere part, because I thought it just kind of gave her that little extra hint of her lineage and what it was why it was she was able to be in society, and how that contrasted with the way her impoverished upbringing sort of kept her out of it.
Yeah, well, that's another amazing tension in the novel, right? Is all that, obviously this is England, especially at this time, the class system is very much in force. And you really, you get such a strong sense for how that works for and against people
Yes.
In society and during the season, and how she has to navigate all of that is fascinating to watch. And Anne, Anne is such a great character, I don't want to spoil the books, but she's a great character. So this makes me want to know, so how did you research, Anne and Neville and Valerie? How did you, did they have scrapbooks, letters? Where did you go for that research?
There were letters. There were, I believe it's the University of Birmingham that I went to that has the Chamberlain family correspondence. And I did do a lot of research with that. But as much as there was that I felt Valerie could bring as the main character, her as a real person, she's a very shadowy figure. She does not get mentioned a great deal, even in the Chamberlain correspondence. She kind of pops up in news articles during the season and a couple of years after it. And then she just kind of vanishes. And that was great, because it gave me a lot of leeway to work with her as a character, but at the same time, sometimes we're inspired by our research. And so there were moments where I'm like, okay. So what I would do is then go look at people who were similar to her, that had about the upbringings like her. So Lady Mountbatten, Clementine Churchill, both had these sort of impoverished backgrounds and then rose to be very prominent ladies. Mm-hmm. But Anne Chamberlain, she had, there was some stuff on her. I cannot, it wasn't an autobiography. I want to say it was written by one of her sisters, and it talked about like her childhood. And that, and then I had, I read a lot of biographies of Neville Chamberlain, because there was actually a really big age difference between Anne and Neville. I think she was in her 20s and he was in his 40s when they married. They thought he was going to be a bachelor forever, and then she met him, and he always credited her as being the reason for his success. But he also came from a very well-established political family. So there was lots of stuff out there. Where it started to get a little difficult was the really personal and intimate stuff. It kind of wasn't there. And so, as I said, that gave me a lot of leeway to kind of fill in the gaps. But at the same time, yeah, it left a lot of questions. But the Chamberlain family correspondence was great to read, and to get a sense of the family and the dynamics, and the way Mr. and Mrs. Chamberlain regarded each other.
Did you get to go to Birmingham to like get the letters, or did you pay to have them digitized or something, or were they?
They're online. It's all online.
They are online.
Thankfully, because I started the research for the book in, I think, August or September of 2019, and it was due in June of 2020. So those last 3 months of writing and researching were
challenging.
They were challenging. So thankfully, a lot of that stuff was online. And then I have a British newspaper archive subscription, and so you can go in there and search the articles and mentions and stuff like that. But yes, luckily the Chamberlain correspondence is online.
That is great when that happens. The JFK, all the Kennedy stuff could be digitized. Anyway, it's great when libraries are able to do that. So I have two related questions. I mean, so here you are writing about like the Chamberlains, like in the lead up to World War II. Like, did you ever think, like, I feel like writers of biographical fiction, sometimes we have these moments where like, so did you have that like sort of like, what am I doing? Like any kind of nerves or anything like that?
A little bit, because I think people have very strong opinions about Neville Chamberlain and what he did and didn't do at that time.
Right.
But at the same time, he died a year after the novel ends. Okay, so he dies in, I think, April or May of 1940. And when you're the guy who follows Winston Churchill, you're pretty forgotten. So yes, people have strong opinions, but also I think there's just people don't know a lot about him and don't even really think about him much. And so I felt like that gave me a lot of leeway. What I tried to do was really look at him from the personal, and then the way I wanted his relationship with Valerie to be in the book, because in the book I wanted to be a father figure. But at the same time, the book is about the young ladies and the women. And so he does take a very, he's very much more in the background. He comes in when I need him to, but he stays
a minor character.
Yeah, he's more of a minor character because it's really about the women and what's going on at that time. But yeah, there was a couple of moments where I'm like, ooh, because like I said, people do have strong opinions about him. So I feel like I kind of didn't, I tried to look at him from the perspective that this is his niece who loves him.
Yes.
And so she's going to view things very differently than perhaps history.
Yes, 100%. And that does, did you feel like that gave you some permission to like do some, imaginative work?
Yes.
I feel that way too. And like, I have to remember like, and it's also, our interpretation of those characters also like on top of that.
Right.
So, were there any fun or less fun surprises in your research?
One of the things that really surprised me was when we think about the debutante season, we always think it's just the marriage market. The girls are out there, they're just there to dance and look pretty and get married and, do whatever they're going to do. But what I thought was really interesting is the way it kind of kept coming up, that this was more than about marriage. It was about training these young women to be able to function in the adult world. I mean, most of the young women who were debutantes were incredibly sheltered. They lived on family estates. They've been educated by governesses. they hadn't really seen the world or interacted with the world. Then suddenly they're shoved into the spotlight and they're told, you've got to talk to everybody. You've got to figure out how to maneuver through, you know, the shark infested waters of society, how to deal with people in all situations and all walks of life, and to do it with poise and grace, and to handle yourself. And that these skills were things that they would need to then go on and live life. So if like a woman married an ambassador, these are skills that she would need to host dignitaries and to deal with all sorts of situations and people. And so that it wasn't just the marriage market, it was a real training ground to mature these young ladies and to give them the skills that they would need. And one of the things I would see that would pop up a lot in the research is how exhausting the season was. They were going from, you know, 5 o'clock at night to 4 o'clock in the morning, and then their parents still expected them up for breakfast, and then they had stuff to do during the day. And this goes on for about 4 months. And one of the things that a lot of the researchers said is that, I mean, nobody knew this at the time, but later on when it came to the war and these young ladies' involvement in the war effort, that sense of stamina and keeping going and things like that served them well, because now they went from the ballroom to working in a factory all day and having to do stuff. So the ability to kind of manage their time and their energy and to keep going when they're tired eventually became incredibly important in the war effort, as did the learning to deal with different people. Because in the documentary I watched, the 1939 debutante one on YouTube, that's what a lot of them talked about, is all of a sudden they were in some of the women's auxiliary military outfits, and all of a sudden they're being sent overseas to Australia or Canada, or just dealing with all sorts of different people in situations. And that was something that the season had prepared them to do. And I thought that aspect of it was really fascinating.
That is really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. That is really interesting. And our mutual friend Kate Quinn, of course, writes about, the women of Bletchley Park, and some of them were also debutantes who were friends with these very girls. So yeah, that is such an amazing, that's sort of an amazing fact of history. Like, I remember when I was writing the Kennedy Debutante, which covers a lot of the same sort of time period, this phrase, keep calm and carry on, that we see everywhere. It's a meme, but it originated in this time period. And you really, like, I gained such an appreciation for what that really meant.
Yes.
Once the war got going, it was like, there's a way of seeing the kind of partying, the sort of incredible level of partying that they did, as, even into the war, right? Like, they were in these clubs when they were getting bombed, right?
Oh, yes.
Like,
yes.
But it was like a big, like, you Germans are not going to ruin our lives. Like, we are going to keep living our lives. And like, it was really kind of profound, right? I mean,
yes.
It really, so I loved that keep calm and carry on even more after doing the research for it.
Oh yes, definitely.
During this time period. So you talked a little bit about, Neville as a father figure for Valerie, but like, so how would you kind of describe the sort of complicated and, without any spoilers, relationship between Valerie and Neville and Anne?
The way I would describe the relationship is sort of, Anne is the mother that Valerie never had. So Valerie's mother left her when she was, I think, only 5 weeks old, or when she was very, very young. So she didn't even know her mother, and her father was useless. And so she ended up in, boarding schools and things like that. And so I portrayed Anne as, the mother Valerie never had, and that she's the person that kind of steps in when Valerie really needs her. And like, without giving away spoilers, how that comes to affect Anne at some point as well, and their history together. And then with her and Neville, again, it was the issue of the father, because Neville came from this family of politicians. He was incredibly responsible. He became prime minister, which was something his half-brother and his father had aspired to, but had never actually achieved. And so here's somebody with an incredible, political success. And then here's Valerie's father, who, just wasteful, just wasted the family fortune. The family house, he ended up having to sell it back to his brother just so they could keep it in the family. And like I said, he died in a hovel in France of a heart attack. And he had this wife that was just, oof, I don't want to give away in the story because
yes, she's interesting.
oh, yes, she is. She's the one, and just because this isn't a spoiler for the story, but his second wife, Valerie's stepmother, after the war, ended up going to jail for stabbing her lover. So if that gives you an idea of the kind of person we're dealing with there. So Valerie doesn't have these great mother influences, but then Anne is a mothering influence to her, but she's also a very strong woman who teaches and encourages Valerie to be courageous and strong, to not let the past affect her, to not give up when things get a little bit difficult, and to do it all with poise and grace. And so I had a lot of fun with that relationship between Valerie and Anne.
Yeah, well, and that is the way it's portrayed, with like a lot of like love and affection. And I want to say to readers out there, like, we're able to like sort of talk about some of these relationships, like, from the bird's eye view, but when you're really in Valerie's point of view, these things are these things are like really complicated, and you really sense her internal conflict about her parents and like trying to figure out who she is in this world, and in this very complicated and rapidly changing world that she is in. And so yeah, I mean, it's really, it is a moment in time. Did you watch the Downton Abbey?
I did. I watched it ages ago, and then the movie, obviously. So I can't remember. I don't think I watched it when I was writing this, but it was that same idea of the being on the cusp of change and the way the world is changing, but it hadn't changed yet. Because one of the things that Valerie has to deal with is, even though she has the lineage to get her into society, she has never really been a part of it. And so she doesn't understand all the ins and outs of it, all the kind of the insider information. And what seems normal to the other girls is something that she has to learn very quickly.
Yes.
And I think that was sort of something that was a theme in Downton Abbey a bit, especially the change. I mean, that was definitely a theme in Downton Abbey. But that's the history of this particular period, is that there's so much change coming, that this is sort of that twilight of those years.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what would you say was the hardest thing about writing this book?
Writing it in the middle of the pandemic.
Well, yeah,
that was tough because I had been researching and writing it, but I had my March through June deadline schedule planned. And well, we all know how that went.
Yeah, right.
So trying to stay focused in that time period was a challenge.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it gave me an ability to understand where my characters were mentally, in that they're living in a world of uncertainty. They can't predict the future. Things are tense, but at the same time, they're trying to live a normal life. Yeah. And so I think that did help me to understand them and to better flesh them out. But yeah, that was a real challenge. I did it, but whew, that was tough.
Yeah, I feel like, we're part of a chat group of historical fiction writers. And I feel like, especially in that first lockdown during the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about the ways in which those of us who had written about World War II, or were currently writing about World War II, the toilet paper shortages, like some of like the wacky things that happened in those first months of the pandemic gave us a whole new appreciation for our characters and people who were, so you were actually able to give it to some of that to your characters that you were writing.
Because one of the things I always say is that we, as the reader, know how everything ends. We know how the war turns out. We know when the war starts. We know it all. But when you get inside the character's head in that particular space and time, they don't. There's this huge looming uncertainty, and they're having to deal with that. And at the same time, keeping up hope that, hey, maybe we won't go to war, but that hope starts to fade. And then the whole future looks super uncertain. And so, dealing with an era of uncertainty as well, did help me to, I think, better create those characters and that unease that they were feeling during that, because the book only takes place from March of 1939. I mean, it starts on March 15th, which was Valerie Cole's court presentation, but it was also the German invasion of Czechoslovakia, which is
Right.
considered the start,
Right.
of when things started to head towards war. And it only goes until July. So it's a pretty short time frame, but it's one that's just packed with a lot of stuff. And so I feel like that time frame of March 2020 to June 2020 had a lot of that as well. There was a lot going on in a short amount of time. So
Yeah.
it was helpful. It's for taking those things that were going on and kind of applying them to my characters.
Why did you decide to choose that specific period of time? That is like a really specific chunk of time. So why that chunk of time? I see the beginning. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
But why?
I really wanted to just go through the season, to just focus on the season. And the season technically goes from March 15th until, I think it was the last thing that was sort of considered was the Blenheim Palace big party.
Yep.
And I really wanted to condense things down so that you feel that sense of pressure and you feel that sense of changes on the horizon. But at the moment, we're living in this very specific time, and this is the way things are now, so we're going to enjoy it. But and I felt if I lengthened that out, you would have lost that sense of unease at the same time with kind of living for the moment. And when you watch and when you read about a lot of that season, a lot of people, and they say they don't know if this is people just looking back or people really felt that way at the time, but a lot of people talk about how they felt that this was a last season and that there was something special about it and unique, and that they kind of knew that this was the last hurrah and that things would never be the same again. And so it was fun to just explore that really short time period.
Yeah, that was something that I found in my research too about this time period. And it's kind of amazing to realize like how prescient they really were. And how, and I'm not sure why, do you think that it was because like their parents had all lived through the previous war, and like they just, these kids who were this age, right? They're between 18 and 20 years old, right? And so their parents all lived through the Great War, or if their parents were alive, as aunts and uncles and grandparents. Did you, I mean, I'm sort of thinking about this as I'm saying it, like, you think it's because they had this awareness that the world had already changed once?
I think so.
And it could
I think so, yeah. Because even if, I mean, these debutantes and stuff, they were all too young to really understand, they didn't know the horror of World War I.
No, they hadn't lived through it.
In a lot of ways, they saw the repercussions of it.
Yes.
Because not to spoil the book, but there's a point in the book where I kind of mention how after World War I, because all the young men had gone off to die, the chances of getting married were rather slim.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a whole book on that. I can't remember the title of the book, but there's a great nonfiction book about that. And
you mean
so
in the 20s? You mean in the 20s?
Yes, in the 20s.
Right. In the 1920s. Yep.
In the 1920s, there was a whole generation of young men wiped out. And because of that, there was a whole generation of women who never got married. And that is something I make a reference of in the book about kind of living in the moment, because you don't know what the future is going to bring. And that they all are aware that there was this whole generation that didn't get married, and because of that, maybe they should take some chances now or do things a little differently and things like that. So I think there was an awareness, even if they didn't have firsthand experience, but I think there was definitely that awareness of how things had changed. Because the other thing is, in the 30s, you have a lot of these aristocratic families that are impoverished, and a lot of that goes back to World War I. Yeah. And so they would have seen firsthand how it changed the fortunes of their families. And I think they could have easily inferred that that was going to happen again.
Yeah, no. And at the same time, I was also surprised to discover, how many of the boys, like knowing what they could be in for, wanted to go. Like, it was really, I mean, those English boys, I think maybe more than the Americans, because like they had been in World War I from the get-go, and it was just like horrible, as we all know, the trenches and everything. And so I was just like, I was just so like humbled by their patriotism.
Yes.
And the women too. I mean, they knew it wasn't going to be great for them either. I mean, they were going to lose brothers and lovers and husbands, and they were keeping calm and carrying on anyway. So it really is like an amazing, I found, at least, researching this pre-war period gave me an appreciation for the war itself that I had not had before.
Yes. Well, I think it's especially different for us, because for us in America, World War II doesn't start till
Right.
1941.
Right.
Whereas in Europe, it's 39. So, they had all these years ahead of time. Not only that, but the lead up, and it affected them more. So yeah, the pre-war is a very interesting time, because there's just so much going on and so much uncertainty. And at the same time, normal life has to, like you said, carry on.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one last question, and we can go to audience questions. And this is a little bit of a throwback to some things we were talking about earlier, and has nothing to do with the war. But I always think that it's fun to talk about process. So what is your general writing process and routine like? And if we have time, how, if it sounds like it did change during the pandemic, and are you, it's okay. So let's go there. Let's start there.
So I write during school hours.
Me
so
too.
I go to my desk, have my Diet Pepsi. I don't drink coffee, so that's my caffeine.
You're who else did that was Joan Didion.
Oh, really? There's a lot of people that have my same soda addiction. But one of the things I like to do is, when I'm doing a rough draft, I have an appointment agenda, like a planner, and it goes by the hour. And so what I do is I will write down because what I like to do is granted, this is on an ideal day, because we all know how life is, but on an ideal day, I do 45 minutes on and 15 minutes off. So that means I set my phone alarm. I write for 45 minutes. If I feel like I'm in the groove and I'm going, I keep going. If I feel like I'm just burning out, I stop. I take 15 minutes. I get a snack. I go on the internet. I do whatever. And then I write down my word count in the agenda.
Yeah.
And then I can keep track of kind of where I'm at and how much I need to do according to X number of weeks. And then once I have a good enough for me rough draft, I'm more of I really like to edit. But then I will go back in and keep going over it and over it and over it and editing. Because I know some people really like that process of writing the first draft. That's not my favorite process. Mine's the editing part. And so then I will just go over and edit and edit, edit. And then I get to a point where eventually, if I'm just changing a word here or there, then I know that I'm done.
Yeah.
And so, usually Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And, 8 to 2:45, all those hours on a really focused day. Let's be realistic. Some days are not quite as focused.
100%.
Yeah. So that's pretty much my process.
That's inspiring. So I've heard this about the sprint with a break, and I've thought about that for myself. I might try that.
I've used it for years and I really like it, especially in the first draft phase where you're just trying to get words on the paper. Yeah. I think it really helps, because I think it keeps me focused. Not always, but because then you have that 15-minute break. And then you feel like, okay, I was productive for that 45 minutes. And like I said, if you're in the groove, you keep going. And if you're not, you're frazzled and you just need to stop, then, you give yourself that break, and then you get a chance to regroup and then come back. So yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because I think there's a thing that it's still a job, it's still something you have to just sit down and do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're entertaining us. So we all think it's all fun and games.
There are deadlines.
Yes, there are deadlines. And that's the nice thing about having the agenda and keeping track of your word count, because you get an idea of hey, I had a really great week, or I had a really bad week. I got a nose to the grindstone it this week. Yeah. And so you instead of kind of being out there in can I finish? But also some of that now does come with experience, because I used to write romance, and I used to write 3 books a year in romance.
Oh my gosh.
And the deadlines were way tighter, and I really had to keep on that word count and on a schedule. And that's kind of where I picked up this habit, so that I would, know where I am and know how much more time I've got. And then, budgeting in extra time, because life always gets in the way.
But it's also one of those good things to know that you have oh, I did really good. I can have a few days off. It's I can give my brain a little bit of a rest.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's important too, because sometimes as you're working, something's not working, and weeks are going by, and you're like, okay, I need to take a break. And if you can look at the calendar and say, look, I can take a couple weeks off, and it's not going to turn into the end of the world, then you take a couple weeks off, come back with fresh eyes, and suddenly it's like, okay, that's why this is not working. So yeah,
because your brain needs to kind of like settle it all in.
it has to process it so you can wake up at 3 a.m. and go, oh my God, that's it.
Typing in the notes on your phone.
Dog, or like some, you know, some you
Yes.
really. Sometimes it really does. You know, it's like the advice we give our kids about their homework, right? Like
Yes.
they're stuck on a math problem, you know, and you can't figure it out either. And,
Yeah.
and you're like, you know, let's all sleep on this.
Yes.
And
And
very
like you said, take the dog for a walk and just let your mind kind of wander. And then all of a sudden it's like,
yes.
Well,
Exactly.
when we were earlier talking about where you all were coming in from, we do have people that are watching us from Minnesota and Brooklyn and Boston. So we've got like the coasts covered and in between too. So that's really fun.
That's great.
And Georgie, I know you're local here and I don't want to put you on the spot, but we need to go offline and have a conversation about if you maybe can come in the store and sign the copies that we
I
have.
can. Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
So
love to.
because somebody asked that in the chat. And so if you do want to sign copy, make sure that you put that in the notes field that you want to sign copy. And then it may delay you getting the book though, because we'll have to coordinate with Georgie to get her up to the store to get those signed. So we'll go offline and do that conversation. But Sharon has a question. Did anything surprise you during your research?
There were a lot of things actually. One of the things that surprised me was just how sheltered these young ladies were before they entered the debutante season. I'm not sure why that surprised me. I feel like that's something I kind of should have known, but from previous research on stuff, but it really did. Like, I didn't realize just how much these young ladies just grew up on the manor house, and that was pretty much it. And then all, you know, their brothers went off to like Eton and Harrow and all those, but the girls stayed home. And I think the other thing that really surprised me is some parents were incredibly involved, but the number of parents that were not involved
Oh, interesting.
was kind of shocking. It was like, okay, I have the kids and they're in the nursery and the governess has them, and I'm going to go and I'm going to keep going to the south of France all the time. And it's something that I deal with one of the characters in the book because that was her upbringing.
Yeah.
And you're kind of just shocked at like, I don't want to say callous, but just complete lack of interest in the kids at all until maybe they hit 16 and then suddenly they were kind of interesting because now you can have a conversation with them. And I'm not saying all of the parents were like that, but I was rather shocked at how many, like Lady Mountbatten, her, I mean, she's not in the book, but I did a lot of research on her. That's how her parents were. They shipped her off to boarding school, and that, you know, she was lucky if she got a birthday card on her birthday. That was rather shocking.
Yeah. Because I think there is I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but there is something about that though, that
Yes.
like we, in our generation where we grew up, it's like, that's unfathomable, you know,
Right,
that we,
right.
yeah, but it seemed to be kind of common of
Well,
a
also,
certain,
I think-
and of a certain socioeconomic. kind
Right.
of-
And it wasn't everybody, but I was shocked at how common it was, because you would read this stuff over and over and think, oh, okay. And I think also because we see things like Downton Abbey, where Lady Cora is very involved in her daughter's relationships and their lives, and we think, oh, that's how they all were. No.
Even the father. I mean,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Abby was a very modern dad.
Yes, he was. And he was not the norm.
No.
No.
Okay, so Holly is an early reader of yours.
Thank
And so
you.
she doesn't want to give anything away here. So if there's any spoilers, anybody might want to like just do that little white noise in your head. But there's a scene where the debutantes go to this really delicious hush hush club. Were these sorts of clubs common? And where did you get the inspiration for that scene?
So there were clubs. The debutantes, even though this was their first coming out in society, they had a lot of rules they were supposed to follow. One of them is you don't get in a taxi with a gentleman alone. You don't go to the nightclubs. Because one of the things that, going back to the surprising kind of thing, is that the girls that did not get married the first season afterwards, once you were kind of out, you didn't have complete freedom, but you had a lot more freedom. So if you'd already been out a season, you could go to somewhere like the 400 Club, which was a very well-known club, but it was very off limits to debutantes. They didn't, have the maturity to go. But of course, if you go watch this documentary on YouTube, they all went. That was the big thing. Sneaking out with your date afterwards and going to the 400 Club was the thing to do. And the girls all talk about that and how it was the thing to do and how they all thought it was this big den of iniquity. And, you know, it wasn't. But it was a thing. But then if you were someone who was younger and not married and you had been out a few seasons, going was kind of not an issue. And then if you were married, because once you were married, the whole world was open to you. And it was a very popular place. And I think what Kerri was saying about, like, during the war, a lot of these places were where people partied, you know, when the bombs were flying. And I can't think of which club it was, but there actually was a club that was also a bomb shelter, or it was reinforced well enough to be one. And then there was another club that I think during the war actually got hit by a bomb.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was called, but
Like, wild
I want to say
people were dancing.
Yeah, people were dancing there.
Yeah.
And I almost want to say it was a club that was in the Ritz that they thought was strong enough to be a bomb shelter. And so when the air raid sirens would go off, you know, everybody would not stop dancing. They would just, you know.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, teenagers are teenagers, though. They
Yeah,
all want to
I mean,
go. They all want to
nothing's
go
really
do the, you know, even whatever years they are.
Yeah.
They want to do the naughty things. And
Yeah, exactly. And they did.
That
You know.
is absolutely 100% right.
Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what era we're in. They're all just like, there's
Yeah.
something about those years and those teenage years and doing that forbidden thing that has so
Yes.
appealing to everybody. Georgie, you mentioned that you had written romance before. What made you switch, or what was the precipice that was like, oh, I want to get into the historical?
Oh, I want to know that too.
Yeah. So I wrote Regency romances for Harlequin Historical under the name Georgie Lee. And I did that for a number of years. And it was great. It was fun and I loved it. But I was wanting to explore other time periods and at the same time, other ways of telling stories. Because the thing about romance is I always like to say, there's not really rules, but there are rules.
Right. Yes.
You know, so there really aren't, there are.
Right.
And so one of the challenges, like when I wrote my first historical fiction, The Other Windsor Girl, one of the challenges I had with that book is I was in one point of view, and I had never done that before, because in romance, I was used to the alternating points of view. And so it was an interesting switch to not be able to like jump away into somebody else's head when I needed a break or didn't know where to go. And so, but the ability to do that, and then the ability to explore different kinds of stories and different kinds of relationships and time periods and things like that is what got me into historical fiction. I just wanted to kind of go in a little different direction.
Yeah. To keep it interesting for yourself, I'm sure.
Exactly.
You know, it's just like, to challenge yourself a little bit and,
Yes.
you know, do the background stories, and the research probably was really exciting.
Oh yeah, because I mean, when you write a bunch of books in the Regency, after a while, the amount of research you have to do shrinks a considerable amount. And so that was interesting too with this book and The Other Windsor Girl, and the one I'm working on now is just and I love to do research. I love to read nonfiction history. So I always say to people, I'm like, if you don't like doing research, don't write historical fiction. But I love it. And so the chance to do that, and it brings up such interesting things. I can't remember what the one was, but always having to Google certain things and think, did that exist in 1939?
Right.
And I can't think of what a good example of that. I know for one of my old books a long time ago, it takes place in 1935 Hollywood. And I have this scene where the characters are in a car and there's a car radio. And I'm like, were there car radios in 1935?
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yes, there
But
were.
that's the thing. That's the thing too, though, with reading historical fiction, because I find myself doing that too. It's like, oh, did that really exist? Were TVs invented then? And then I'll do research, because I know you guys have researched it, but there's something about when we're reading it too, we go, did they really have that then?
Yeah, because you think sometimes you think that it isn't there, but then you're like, oh, okay.
I had a moment in my Grace Kelly novel where I have her recording her voice. And I was at some point in like a late draft, I was like, and I looked it up and I was like, so personal recorders would not have had that.
Yeah.
In 1949. So,
but it is amazing though how how things are invented earlier than you think they are. Though.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there is some of that where you just go, oh, that was that early. So
yeah.
All right, ladies, you two have been wonderful. It's been a great conversation. Kerri, can you tell us anything about what's coming up new for you, or what's
yes, I'm actually sitting in front of a beautiful like representation of what is going to be if you go to my Instagram, you can see the actual cover of my next book, which is called The Paris Bookseller. It is about the original Shakespeare and Company bookstore in Paris that opened in 1919. So it's a Paris in the 20s novel. You know, it was opened by an American woman named Sylvia Beach. And I'll leave it there.
Okay. And where can we look forward to that? I think I already
January
know, but
11th.
yeah.
January
I kind
11th.
of already know that. There's some fun that we're going to have.
Thank you for reminding me. January 11th. Yes.
Perfect. And people can go to your website and find your social media and all that stuff at your
Yes,
website.
100%.
Okay. And it's a Kerri Maher or Kerri Majors?
It's Kerri Maher. I'm sorry I didn't change my name on that.
That's okay.
So yeah, Maher is my writing name, and it is a family name. So Kerri Maher writer on Instagram and Facebook.
Perfect. Okay. And Georgie, I know that this is the horrible question to ask on launch day, but we always ask it.
Yes.
What are you working on next? Can you share anything?
Oh, yes, I can. I'm working on it's a book about Queen Victoria's daughter, Princess Louise. And she was an artist, and she had quite a life. She was kind of a rebel at the time. And so I'm working on that. That's due in December. And so that's how I'm, you know, that's my new thing that I need my organizer for and stuff, and keeping up on and stuff like that. So so that I'm not sure when that's going to be coming out, because like I said, I'm turning it in December. So probably sometime in 23.
Okay, perfect. All right. And people you have a wonderful website too, georgieblaylock.com.
Yes, georgieblaylock.com. I'm on Instagram at Georgie Blalock. I'm a little on Facebook, but I don't use that much. So it's Georgie Blalock. I'm pretty sure it's there too. So
Okay, perfect.
I should know that, but
I know. Well, you go to the website and you can click on everything.
And then on the website, I do have a page for the last debutantes, and I do have some highlights about the season. So if you want to see a few little fun facts, see a recipe for a cocktail, which Kerri should remember from the great cocktail book that we all did a while back.
Yes.
And just find out a few other little things about that. And there's actually a picture of Valerie Cole with Anne and Neville Chamberlain, things like that. So that's on my website, georgieblaylock.com.
That's always fun when you guys do that on your websites, to just like you get to peek into some of the real stuff that's there. That's really a fun thing. Ladies, thank you again. We are going to go off Facebook now and stop the recording. So good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Congratulations, Georgie, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.